I'm Lindsay,
And welcome to NingyoBINGO,
where you keep collecting dolls.
but you never seem to win the game.
Ha! You didn't steal from me this time. Alright.
So, while our studio was all set up, we decided to do one more video. Of course, you won't see them back to back because that would be doing a lot of work and only putting out all at once, which is not the point of
And frankly, Becca's the only one with the editing thing, so even if I wanted to help, I can't. So we're going to have to just do this one thing at a time.
Yeah.
But what are we talking about today, Becca?
It's what I spent more than a few $100s on that isn't the upgrades to my Mac.
Ah, yes.
which is my new Grail doll, which is the Elder Eipelhaus doll, Karina.
Now, if you haven't watched our previous episode, and you should have, because we talk about a lot of really cool things about Grail dolls and what goes into making a Grail doll, what does it mean for our hobby, Becca has had a picture of Karina as the background for her desktop for about 5 years.
It's this really cool one. I wish I knew the artist because I don't, because, Google image search isn't always nice. And there's water splashed on her like she just came out of a pool, like a Bond girl.
Freshly out of the pool, model style.
Yeah, like that.
It's a beautiful picture of the, I can't even remember the name of the gosh darn thing. White skin, normal skin.
I think they call it real skin.
They call it real skin at Eipelhaus.
Yes.
Which is a slightly darker tone.
Though they have some tones other than that, but their real skin, I think it's the one that is commonly able to be ordered without waiting for an order period.
A special order period for the darker skin tones that they tend to do.
Right.
But the most important thing about this Karina, other than the fact that Becca has finally achieved the dream, sort of, is that as long as I've known Becca doesn't like double joints.
No, I don't. I do not like double joints because they end up having it ends up being an unnatural looking silhouette that I find unnerving and hits me in all of the uncanny valley places.
For me, I don't mind double joints quite as much, but I'm very picky about how they're constructed. And Karina here is the first truly double jointed, highly engineered, I would say, doll that you've really had.
Well, with the exception of the Delft Type 3
which,
body.
I mean, isn't super duper engineered.
Yeah, so they did some cool things in these bodies, which, honestly, in the end, the Delft Type 3 and the Elder Eipelhaus doll, I actually think have similar amounts of mobility. What they do not have in common is similar amounts of stability.
Delft, in particular, is very notorious for their joints giving way abruptly to the tension of the elastic, and were designed with a certain kind of philosophy in mind. The Delft 3 body here is the first Lutz version of the body. The others were kind of designed by Cerberus Project.
This one came out first.
This came out first, okay.
Yeah, it was like the predecessor to them doing that, and the predecessor
is the last sort of combo body
before they jumped and started on their Feeple 70, which featured the same key system and joint system, and eventually their Pookie Pookies, and then much later the reintroduction of what we know as the Delfts.
So for Becca, Karina's a big change in how you relate to how joints work.
Yes.
And learning these joints has been interesting, and seeing how they work versus how other companies like to work has been equally interesting. So we thought we'd take you guys with us on a journey in looking at the joints of a Karina, or the Eipelhaus Elder system, and then starting to talk about what's happening in those joints, what do we particularly like about them, what we don't like about them, and compare them to some other companies that we happen to have who've taken different takes on the same problems with different solutions, or taking them in different aesthetic directions.
Yes, and now important to note, I believe this is actually one of the first iterations of the Elder Eipelhaus doll joints. I think they're on their third revision now.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And I remember initially when the Eipelhaus first came out, a lot of people were like, a mature, like kind of normally proportioned doll. This is amazing. And then they would receive the doll, and there was a big learning curve about the joints, and they felt a little clunky to people.
There's a lot of interesting things in there. Like Volks has done some. Let's see. They're him.
We have one here. If both of us if we part the seas.
If I just bring him up to the camera, I suppose.
We're going to have a lot of dolls on the table. So I will hold Orion.
So he has notches in the back of his knees.
Which you cannot see because he's wearing lovely pants right now.
We could bring him, just don't turn him forward because then he'll have his wee-wee up in front of everybody.
We are going to try to be family safe as much as possible. We rarely succeed, but we'll try.
I mean, we are de-pantsing a doll. I mean, how much can you do here? So
sorry, Orion is most of his story just being completely
there is
a bad time.
a notch back here, which I'm going to take a photo with my handy-dandy camera as I put his knee backwards. Focus. Take a picture. Which means when he goes into the joint there, it actually locks in and prevents it from rolling forward and prevents him from doing what the Lutz do, which is just kind of bouncing back this way, as the shortest path from here to here in the elastic is actually with the knees bent. Okay, you can put your pants back on now. Thank you.
So why don't we talk a little bit about how Karina looks in general and how her stuff works in general.
Yes.
And then we can switch over to the up-close camera as we talk about sort of the specifics of the engineering of what's happening.
Yes. So why don't we show a little bit of range of movement with our larger camera here? And I could. Do you want to show off the Delph while I show off Karina, since I'm a little bit more familiar with her?
Well, then that's how we'll do it. We have to switch them real quick.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh God, she's huge and heavy. There you are.
Yeah.
Have her booty. There she is.
Okay. So first of all, sitting down.
So are we going to compare them back to back or straightforward?
Straightforward is fine. So,
all right.
So
this is the awkward part.
Yeah.
Here we are.
So her legs don't go much further than this apart long. Yeah, and then his do that.
The joints very easily.
Yeah, like he can do he can do some yoga right now.
As you can see, I am not holding him. He is holding this position on his own. He can go a full 360 degrees because we'll talk about this later, but the shape of this is, if you're weirded out by dolls being pulled apart, sorry. Unfortunately, it's the easiest way to sort of show what's happening.
Yes.
We're going to have a lot of floppy bodies, so we're going to have, the corpse problem. But his hip joint is a big ball.
Yeah.
And the useful thing about a large ball in the joint is that balls move in 360 degrees. They have a lot of freedom of motion. But that also means there's not much keeping them from moving because they are a round object that wants to sort of rotate. And they rotate easily and without much fuss.
So,
however,
the shoulder joints, I think, have just about as much range of motion. You have a little bit more, slightly more upward motion with the ball joint being down than her, but just
that's partially helped along by this extra piece. If you're not familiar with Delphs, I'm gonna pull him to pieces. Sorry, Felix. There's this extra round cup-like situation, which Becca's taking a picture of.
Yes.
There's this cup thing that sort of extends the range possible inside of this ball and cup sort of situation going on.
And you pulled the knot out of the body, so now it needs to go back in. Oh God.
I have ruined everything.
Wait, maybe I can pull it back into this.
This is part of the problem as we're trying to show a lot of the joints. Some of these are older dolls, especially if it's one of the older guys. They're not quite as taut, and there's a knot inside where all the elastic's been tied together. While Becca's fixing what I have unfixed, a note about how the elastics work. She's succeeded. Is there's a sort of looped piece of elastic going from hand to hand, and there's another piece going from foot to head to foot, which is why the arms are a bit attached to each other.
That's also why when you move one arm,
the other one likes to move with it a little bit.
Yeah, especially
if you're not seeing as much right now.
Yeah, if it's a doll with a little bit more tension, you'll see that.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but it is just how the thing is. But that's how Felix works with the Delph 3 body. But we go over to Karina, and she has similar movement. But she can't go quite as far because she doesn't have this secondary cup joint sort of extending the movement range, fluidity of the shoulder joint.
So now we get to the elbow. Now the elbow on Karina
calisthenics now.
has this little extra joint in it, but first you hit a hard stop because you have to do some interesting stuff to work that extra joint. However, on Felix, it automatically
he kind of wants to pop out a little bit there.
It automatically engages that second joint that floats out of the socket, but it doesn't really go further than that.
Well, why don't you get her same arm doing the same thing that he's doing right now, so we can really see in the overview what this looks like.
So this is her. If I turn it upwards, you can kind of see the difference. And that's him, and he can go even a little further.
He can, potentially.
Yeah. So
if you pop the joint out.
But even without popping the joint out, you're at a...
You can do a nice ballet sort of movement here.
Okay.
But for Karina, while the basic joint, which is very log-like, which a double joint normally looks like, she can only go into here with her normal joint. But their solution, whereas with Delph, hopefully we'll show this closer later, has sort of an extension to like this double cupped joint that kind of gives you this extra 360-degree ball joint movement. Karina,
tap. Yeah, so tap the video, keep it nice and smooth, and you can just tap the red there. There you go.
You see that there is this beautiful ball joint thing going on where this is relatively circular, though it's a little bit oblong. And then there's this secondary section here that kind of moves a little bit extra so that it has like more movement outside of the cup joint inside the straight line of the arm.
Meanwhile, if we move over to here, she hits this dead stop on the elbow, but then you have to pull it out.
Get my hand over there.
And you'll see up here there's ridges, and those are different locking positions.
Now, if you look at both of these elbows next to each other, actually.
Zoom out, there we go.
Zoom out. Sorry about my camera work. You can see how different the shapes that these companies used are.
And you can see the difference of the silhouette, which is the part that I complained about the most.
The solution with Lutz was to take advantage of a circular 360-degree ball and kind of give it a little bit of like sort of a place to live. And the Ippelhaus idea is to create this log situation that has essentially like two balls shoved together.
Yes.
That allows like the two straight lines of the arms to kind of bend.
And it gave it this wonderful locking mechanism, which allows places in between the pose for the doll to settle into, which means it can stay here pretty easily. And increases stability, but you decrease the prettiness of the aesthetic.
Yeah. Meanwhile, while Felix can pretty naturally, let me make sure that he's actually in focus here. He can pretty naturally move on his own through a whole variety of states while retaining a fine silhouette. He can't hold between poses.
No, I mean, he would be able to if I wired him, but even then there's nothing locking him into that position if gravity were to take hold.
As we're dealing with straight lines being held together by pieces of tension, which is the elastic, there's very little that can be done without changing the resin to create that stability to hold those different spots.
So we can probably stop that one for the moment, and we'll come back to that in a moment.
Yep. So as we move on.
So next thing is just quite simply the ankles. Hers moves a little left, a little right, little left, little right. That's about it. What about Felix?
Well, if we bring up Felix, as I am very careful with his knees, and we put his footy out, he can point. He points very nicely.
She can't point.
Well, let's get their feet on the same side, doing the same thing.
Yeah, like she
Well,
can't.
we're gonna have to hold them in like this so people can see.
Yeah, she can't point. Like it's literally there and there. That's it.
However, this does mean that dear Felix is a little less stable in his ankles.
Yeah, I can actually just go like this, and Lord willing.
Ta-da! And we'll see if I can do the same. But I'll tell you which one I would bet on not falling.
Yeah.
Between the two of these guys here.
Yeah, which
Felix is holding a pretty shockingly good position for a Delph at this moment. They are capable of this, but you would never leave him unsupervised this way.
Yeah, like...
Oh,
wait, challenge.
We're gonna challenge? Let's see who can pose better.
Arm is out.
Alright, here we are. As you can already tell, I'm already a lot more...
You can see which one
I'm a little bit scared.
Which one of us is sweating more. Also, we can tell which one of us is shorter because, well, I got the taller doll. Maybe we should have...
That didn't quite work the way we planned it to.
No, it didn't.
But, with Felix, too, I kind of need to do this to make him
yeah,
put his arm this way.
I did the same thing because I was taking advantage. But now
no.
You're going to throw his balance off.
Now I have to start shifting the feet. Shifting the feet.
And this is
Getting
where...
the hands in... Oh! Ah! But you can tell I am not trusting it. I can't trust him to hold this. He looks precarious to me. My hands are hovering around him to protect his beautiful face.
So
and his feet have to be askew. I have to do a lot more adjustments to get the weight distributed properly because he's not going to hold it by himself by nature of his joints.
And she's relying on the friction of the joint here to keep him posed, in which at any point it loses the grip on that friction.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to poke him.
Okay, poke.
I've got a hand here. I'm going to save him. Nothing's going to go wrong. I'm going to poke him a little lightly from behind. Don't look at it. And there he went.
Okay.
Now, I think it's worth doing the same for Korean. I'll keep my hand out here.
Okay, yeah.
Poke her just lightly, just as lightly as I poked him. We'll see how if she falls like a house of cards or not.
Yeah.
Alright, you ready for a poke?
Yeah.
You ready?
Well, no.
She started to go, but she didn't collapse anywhere near the same way that Felix did.
Yeah, one thing is each of their joints, each of Karina's joints that has a lock. So even the knee, which I think...
Well, let's take a close-up look here.
There you go. So we got the video going. Even the knee has a lock here for when it's standing. There's this little edge. And that actually, just like the Delph, locks into this edge right over here. And it means that she doesn't want to come out of this position where you see that little snap. That's that joint coming in and out of that position. So, if we come down here,
and let me...
So with the Delphs, you end up not having... You don't have that friction to overcome, so if you collapse, everything comes down all at once. So similar to the elbow, you have this thing here for the knee, and it doesn't have gradations in this case, it just kind of sits like this.
And of course, this is to obtain the coveted kneeling position.
Yeah, which is nice. She actually does it a little better than the rest of my dolls. I don't think any of the rest of my dolls can actually do it without their knee coming out of joint.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's really impeccable.
Yeah, so that being said, it's not a natural thing. Okay, now the hip. Now,
well, why don't we talk a little bit how Felix does the same in the knee department?
Okay, yeah, let's bring Felix over.
You take that.
Okay.
You take your turn, dear.
Okay, so here we go. Here's Felix's knee. It has this cute little... Okay, now here's Felix's knee.
It helps when we hit the record button, folks.
And,
it's always so hard. I'll try to keep him as sideways as humanly possible.
So
here.
with that
move
neat
him
little
instead of you having to move him.
Fairyland double joint, it kind of gets to like a 45 degree, but it can't really get to the calf touching the thigh.
It's also partly how the lower leg is sculpted. It just, even if I take him completely out of joint and just set him up against each other, it doesn't match nearly as nicely as it does in Karina in terms of being able to bend around.
Yeah, so that's not going to happen. Now we're up to the thigh. So Felix's thigh doesn't need any added mobility because his joint is one complete ball joint. It has the one cup, which actually allows for that additional extension.
This is so awkward. My life is awkward doll touching.
Which is that side to side. But you don't need anything to help with the rotation because of the way it's made.
It's all that ball cup construction, which is like the one theory of joint construction that exists, and then there's the two balls on the end of a sort of a bar, which is what happens in double jointing.
Yes. So
as he currently looks like a beautiful dead body.
Oh God, yeah.
Ding.
Please fix that leg. Okay, you're fine.
Are you done, buddy? He got to keep his gloves on.
Yeah.
To keep his dignity.
Okay, so here we go. Now
Alright, now we're moving to Karina.
So Karina has.
We're looking at the thigh?
Yeah, Karina has what's called the mobility thigh. The mobility thigh allows you to turn the leg in and out, which helps with splaying the foot left, right, and add additional balance. It also allows you to have her bring her hip up further than the 90 degrees. So I'll show you what I mean. Her hip is very peculiar, and it's the only doll I've ever seen like this, and it's fairly difficult to work with.
If you can get her down a little bit. There we go.
So there's these little notches, and this piece that looks like it's strung separately that actually fits into each of those notches as you put her on. So I actually have a wonderful bodysuit, but the problem is the bodysuit strings her together so tight that when you're trying to put her together, you actually have to pull out on the joint and rotate up for it to lock into the next position.
Which unfortunately does not help you very much when you're doing with something skin tight that's going to get sucked into the voids.
Yes.
Sucked into the void between the joints.
So what this does, this fun little feature, means that when she is sitting, we can change to new mode, she can do things like lift the one leg above the 90 degrees so she can be all sexy.
Now Felix, to his credit, can do a very similar thing. But he has done something that you can't see on camera, but that I saw very easily.
Oh, take a picture of the,
Is that his joint, I have all these things on the table, sorry folks. Is that his joint has completely left has left the building.
Has left the ball socket.
Has left the ball socket.
Which we can take a picture of so it can be easier to see. Okay, picture.
So hopefully there will be insert picture here of exactly what we're talking about.
Okay,
so you
there
can
we
see
go.
it nice and up close.
And a bit.
Boop.
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 Booped it.
Booped. Alright, we booped it. So technically the two of them can achieve, fairly naturally looking from the front at least, the same pose, but Felix has to, the ball joint and the ball socket situation just can't, well, I'm going the wrong direction for you guys to be able to say, just can't handle it past a certain point. It pops very naturally out, sort of like that. But with Karina, the joint never leaves the socket because the real bending is happening at a different point.
It also gives her a nice solid base for her to sit on that's very stable, because this joint and this joint,
This guy right here, yeah.
the little, I don't know, butt joint.
The butts.
Yeah.
The hip and butt joint.
Yeah, it doesn't actually leave the table, so it's very stable left, right.
Yes.
And this guy goes whoopsie. So this is the other problem I've had with her, which is because of those little joints lock together, somehow if you pull it out a little or bump it a little, it wants to knock back out and stuff. Now, while he doesn't have the locking joints and he kind of does that all the time, you're expecting her to lock, so when she does move, you're going like, oh shit. There's that moment. Yeah.
There's always a certain amount of fear when you are doing more extreme poses with dolls, especially if you're in the hobby for photography, because then you have to like set them up and then trust them to stay, because you have to move around.
You're like, okay.
And usually requires quite a bit of distance so that you have a feeling of perspective as opposed to seeing them as a
and
small
not
object.
breathing and no strong breezes. And no cats.
Indoors is great, but
with no cats.
Yeah. But you can see, like, for Felix, even though he has to pop out of his joint, it doesn't actually look too bad. The old Delph bodies really aren't too bad if there's a certain aesthetic that you're really into. But Karina's definitely more stable.
Yes.
The poses she can take are more stable.
Yes.
But the options are fewer.
Yeah, because she gets a little bit limited in range of motion around the neck, around the ankles. They did this cool thing I love. I'm going to take a picture.
All right.
Of her hand.
Is it time to boop it?
Huh?
Boop the picture.
Yeah, I booped it.
You booped it.
I heard boob, and I'm like, no, we're not showing those.
They're nice and carefully covered.
Yeah.
Despite what Karina might want.
Yeah.
That's a blooper for another time.
Insert blooper.
Insert blooper here.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So it has this cool seat part, which I think I've heard people lose, but it's nice because it just covers up that little empty void between the hand joint and the thing, as opposed to almost every other doll I see where, you know, you see the, oops, focus better, gosh darn it. You see the hook and you see the
hook in the void where the hook is hooking into the hand.
Yeah.
If you're not familiar, there's usually on the hand, there's usually like a little C of resin, and then like there's a little hooky, and I am doing a horrible job using my hands to illustrate this. They kind of hook together.
The S hook.
Like this. Yes, the S hook, as they say in the professional zone of the hobby that doesn't quite exist. As you can see, it does not take much for the delve to lose position, but Karina's like a solid, like a rock.
Yeah, well, just remember last video, leaning on things? Yeah.
Okay, you know what? I lean on the table and it runs into the microphone.
And knocks
knocking over an expensive microphone sucks.
I mean,
So we're trying not to do that.
Yeah. Okay, so that being said, we do have one other doll to talk about the joints of.
Because we have sort of a highly engineered, with where the people who made the joints went, these are the positions people will put her in.
Yes.
And we're going to facilitate those specific poses. We have Felix, who's a little bit older in terms of the technology of joints in the hobby, where we're still building mostly off of the feeling of like a single ball and cup joint situation. And there was always a lot of frustration that they wouldn't hold those between positions. It's all or nothing with these joints, really. And what I happen to have with me is Bashik's on her joints. She's sort of found a bit of a middle ground between the double joint, which is very limiting but very solid, and the ball joint, which is a bit more free but doesn't hold between positions quite as well. This is me grabbing my doll. So this is Bashik's Dark Elf, the first round that she did in the white skin because Cry never got the purple skin. And he's like currently laying like a corpse.
I need to fix the hand. There you go.
Becca's Uncanny Valley is a little shallower than mine, I think. But they have him.
I'm more self-aware of it, I found, when I'm actually on camera, because I'm like, oh god, what if somebody else thinks about that?
That's true.
Yeah.
It's true, we have to consider other people, don't we?
No.
We're kind of doing this as a self-indulgent thing regardless. However, with the Bashik's toy, I might as well have him standing. He has pants on because I don't have smaller things.
Did I make those?
Yeah, I made these.
Oh, okay, I'm like...
I sewed something, Becca.
Right, I made the shirt that didn't quite fit.
Yes. And his head nicely fell off. It actually holds on quite nicely. The magnets are quite strong. But while he is a little bit differently proportioned, he's a little bit closer to the more realistic proportions. He's a tiny little head. He actually, like, he's a little tall for his head. But he does some interesting things.
Okay, should I put it on video?
Come with me on a journey.
Okay, I need to be in this, which is the correct format for recording. Okay. Alright, I am recording.
Alright, so we have the shoulder joint, which much like Felix, and actually much like Karina, is a large ball and socket joint. He's a bit larger here, like on Felix, which gives him a little bit more range of motion. He holds very nicely his arm up, without having to do the flip over shenanigans that we did in the other two.
Of course, when we do that, the downside of this is that's not a natural.
That is not a particularly natural silhouette, though. No. But he holds it very nicely. He's quite stable. He can't really hold in between positions, which is the problem with a ball and socket joint. They can't do in between positions.
Which is why we swayed in wire. Except
his elbow initially looks a lot like, it's very similar to Karina's, that it can do a very nice 90 degree angle. Boop. Boop. And you can see how on holding his arm outright, there's sort of a locking mechanism, but he doesn't like to do it. So he's got a little bit of a problem called mantis arms. Because it wants to bend this way, because it's the shoulder
So you said that locks in. How does that lock in? Show me.
So, boop.
Oh.
It is a much simpler version of the double joint. So now he can do a nice 90, like he can do almost a full bend of his arm using the peanut situation, but he doesn't have the
locks parts.
The notches that Karina does. So you get a little bit of the benefit of being able to pull it out and turn his arm. It's not the most beautiful silhouette that I have ever seen in an elbow, but it does the job actually quite well. without getting too far into the notches, but that does mean he cannot hold, well, he can sort of hold this vaguely in between position, but he can't really hold in between positions either.
Yeah, and that's where they really engineered that on the Eiffel House.
Because they really wanted to be able to do the in-between positions.
Okay, we good with video?
Yeah.
Okay, because I think his knees are about the same, right?
His knees, as I pull up here...
Oh, wait. Okay.
His knees here do a very similar thing to Felix's, where it has a sort of back and forth. You notice, like, here, there's a little bit more of a shelf on him than on the other two dolls, but this is very similar to how Karina's joint works. But similar to his elbow, it takes a little bit of manhandling, but less. He can do a full bend. It's a pretty good bend. Pretty good, 180 degree here.
And one of the parts I found difficult with Karina is trying to pull out the bottom leg while it's underneath fabric.
Well, let's see how good I can do on him with because there's less notches, there's less to get trapped.
Yeah,
it's harder to there's less pinching.
It's like me trying to pull one part without trying to pull the other part while also trying. There you go. Without trying to pull his pants off. So
and I'm able to do it underneath this suede fairly. Not too much trouble.
Okay.
But you can't hold the between positions at all.
No, not without.
With the ball and socket joints, it's all or nothing.
Yeah,
unless you use suede.
Suede and wire.
Without sueding and wiring.
Video off. So
let's see how he does on the same position everyone else is doing. He can do it, but his joint, because he just has a simple ball and socket joint in his hip, he also does what Felix does, which is pop straight out. And for him to bend forward, as I will show you sideways, he has the same thing Karina does. He has notches, so he has one simple notch, so he can kind of do a manly slouch.
That's exactly what Karina has too. I'll take a picture of both of them here. Wait, that's time last video. That's photo. Okay.
But actually, like, if you look at all of them going forward, none of them do a bad job of sitting. Once you're following along with what the joints want you to do.
Yes, it's just, I would say that it comes down to where do you want them sitting and how do you play with them.
Yeah. With the Eiffel House, at least amongst these three, can be more center, I suppose. He also has a thing in his hip, so he can be a little bit more join the party here.
Yeah, she does not have a hip thing.
He doesn't particularly sit up super great, so we'll give him
the dogs kind of have a little hip thing, so
yeah. And his pants are unfinished, so there's all sorts of things happening with this poor boy.
Oh.
Any case, Eiffel House can hold between because they've added notches that sort of fight the tendency of the elastic to pull against a circular shape to kind of pull it the shortest distance possible.
But it takes a little doing to move them, especially underneath clothing, because you have to pull it out and find that lock.
You're fighting a lot of tension.
Which is a little hard to do sight unseen.
Yes.
The Delphs have a lot of range of motion, but there's no locking whatsoever. So you lose out. You can pose them in anything you want, but without sueding or wiring, your confidence level in walking away and taking a photo or walking away to a different table if you're at a meet or something is low.
It's very zero. And with Bad Chicks, we have a lot of nice stability things going on, like her, like his ankles work the way that Karina's does. They kind of have less movement, but they're more stable. So standing, he is beautiful stander.
Yes.
And he'll stay there.
He is beautiful stander.
He is beautiful stander. There's I have 4 accents I can do, and that is one of them. A very bad, terrible Russian one. And they all have their strengths and their weaknesses.
Yes. And of course, when you're getting into single joints, you're going to have a lot of what the Karina had before you engage that second lock.
Which is like, as just a very hello, I have 2 things I can do.
Which makes, it usually ends at the 90, and then anything else you're coming out of joint. Which you may not see when you have clothes on, but if you want to take a photo, you're going to have to hold it there somehow.
Or have wire involved, which is fighting the tension for you instead of you having to put your hand there.
Right, exactly.
So Karina is a little more complicated, but she does some interesting things by herself.
Yes, and honestly, she's a little heavier amount of resin, so I'm glad that there's
There's more stability involved.
Right. So we were talking in our joints, friction, and function episode about the forces that's
on the podcast for anyone who doesn't know.
Yes, that works against you, and you have gravity, and gravity is mass times, like a force is mass times acceleration.
Yes.
Right. So Karina has more mass.
Right.
So she needs sturdier, more engaging forces in her joints.
It takes more friction to fight the pull of gravity on the mass.
Exactly. So I'm glad she has sturdier joints in the end, because if she was this heavy but didn't have any of those stability things added, she would not be able to stand. I had this experience with my Feeple 70.
Oh, that's right. This was one of the attempts to reshell Tempest.
Yeah, so it was his joints, but her height was a lot more slender, in between in weight, because she was a little more slender here, more slender on the hips.
Still, it was a lot more resin, there's a lot more mass, and without the stability of a slightly more highly engineered joint, she just went.
Yeah, there was no
She
standing.
was gone.
I did not own stands at that point. All my dolls just sat, but like even then, like it just didn't. And there was in the Delphs, there is no locking mechanism in the back of the hip.
So the legs just boo.
Yeah, even just sitting, there's no lock in the sitting position. The Volks SD13 does indeed have one in the back of the hip, so there's a little notch where it rotates and then it engages right there. So it rotates out and locks in.
And let me tell you, I've had my hands on the larger boys that Volks does these days, the SD17s.
Well, 16s I think mostly
16.
now.
Well, I'm not talking about the girls, I'm talking about the boys. Because SD16
17.
girls,
You're right.
SD17 boys, because the boys are always older for some reason.
Yeah, it's the 17 boys, yeah.
I have had my hands on SD17 boy via a very gracious friend who trusted me with a handling. He is taller than her, heavier than her. The joints are exquisite.
And they keep him pretty stable.
He's very stable,
cool.
And they engage rather nicely. The silhouette really isn't bad. It's one of the most impressed I've been about engineering of joints in a while, to be honest, is the SD17 body. And the SDGR body is not so bad either, but the SD17, for how heavy those things are, because you could kill a person with them. Like, they can stand and be solid, which is incredible to me.
So if you want to learn more about joints, you can check us out, our episode on joints, friction, and function on our podcast. You can check us out via NingyoBINGO.com, NingyoBINGO.
A thing I can never spell when I say it because I want to drop the Y.
We also have our Gmail with that same spelling, and gmail.com.
NingyoBingo@gmail.com.
We also have a Twitter, a Facebook, and a blog spot.
The Twitter, the Facebook, well, it's all at the same name. We're lucky that we chose a different, quite sort of spelling than normal for some of these for Ningyo.
Well, it's interesting because that's actually... It's one of the earlier breakouts.
The earlier versions of how transliteration worked.
Right, before they really got into more phonetic, because Ningyo actually kind of has the O sound, which is like they usually show a line over it nowadays, or an OU, but I don't know.
But we're not here for a Japanese lesson today,
right,
unfortunately.
Yeah, right. No.
But if you're looking for it, remember the Y in Ningyo, which is the Japanese word for doll.
Yes.
And you can tweet at us, you can send us emails. We love it when you say things to us. It makes us so happy.
I mean, it might sound obvious, but this is on YouTube, so you can actually, like, there's
comments down there.
Yeah.
And there's also I hear about a subscribe button.
Oh, yeah. There's like a subscribe button. I think that's
the subscribe button somewhere down there.
Right. Okay,
is it over here these days?
It's over here.
It's over here now. It used to be over here, but now it's over here.
Yeah, now it's over here. And there's like a little...
They're going to change it like the day we post this video, I swear.
I know. And there's like a little like bell thing you press.
For alarms when you put on new stuff.
Right, because the things have like... I've heard that...
Because subscriptions got weird.
Yeah, and they have algorithms and stuff that don't actually let you know when everything gets updated.
Which is fine, I suppose. But we love hearing from you, and we want to hear about you. Do you disagree with us entirely on our opinion of joints? We went pretty middle of the road today. Please tell us good, bad, not good, not bad. If you have an idea for something you would like us to record later, please let us know, because we want to do things you want to listen to, because it brings us happiness to know people are listening to us and not just talking to each other.
Yeah, and if we had a subject that we went over in our podcast that you think might do well with a revisit in video, let us know. So as you look at the wonderful new Eichel House girl body with the sexy, sexy, awesome abs.
I love the new athletics body. It is so up my alley.
Remember to keep on collecting dolls.
But keep a budget. My batch 6 is ready to be dragged in.
Yeah, I'm sure that's talking won't be enough. Okay, so I'm going to count down to 3. We're going to have 3 seconds of silence, and then we will start out.
Sounds good.
Okay, it is getting darker.
Mm-hmm.
All right, 3, 2.
Blooper for the record, for the ages.
Oh no!
That's the secret little cut that you put in the back, like at the end of the video, like some people do. Like if you wait.
Oh no!
I fixed it. It's fine.
I'm getting a safety pin.